You lightly touched there on some of the bad things that happened in the Angola camps. Talk us through some of the risks that the ANC members in exile would have faced at that time.
Well, the problem in Angola was that after the Soweto uprising, a lot of young people came out, and many of them joined the ANC. And some went for military training in Angola, some went to Tanzania, where they went to the ANC school. Some Africa, some went on to universities in various parts of the world. But Angola was the only place where the ANC could have military training camps at that time. Zambia said no, Tanzania said no, Mozambique said no. But Angola wasn't an ideal place because Angola was a kind of hot spot of the Cold War. There was a civil war going on in Angola. And the ANC's camps were placed in very difficult and dangerous places. So they actually became involved, in a kind of way the ANC became involved in somebody else's civil war. They became involved in an Angolan civil war. And there were a lot of risks involved. A lot of people got killed in ambushes or they got killed fighting in what they tended to think was not really their war. And that was one of the reasons why there were these mutinies, or two, what you might call mutinies. Some people would argue whether they were mutinies or not, where people got really upset and took military action. Some people were killed on both sides. So some of the mutineers were killed. Some people who on the what you might call the official side were killed. It was a very, very tense moment. But I think that this was really not entirely the fault of the leadership of the ANC. It was the fact that the ANC was, through no choice of its own, placed in a very, very difficult environment. And I think that explains to a large extent the bad things that happened. Some bad things happened in Zambia too, but not on the same scale. It was Angola which was difficult. It was very difficult. And there was always, it's a fact with all exile movements that there is a tendency towards paranoia, a tendency to feel that some of the people that you're with are actually working for the other side. There's a tendency to think that some people are spies or that they can't be trusted. And to some extent the South African apartheid government encouraged that. I think they probably did actually press gang some people into exile who weren't really, weren't enthusiastic towards the ANC. They were what would be described as criminal elements who were disruptive. And there may also have been people who were working for the apartheid regime who were in exile. I don't think very many, but some.
Yeah. Now, when discussing the end of apartheid, we rarely hear about these ANC members that were in exile. Do you think they're not getting enough credit for what they did and how they were involved?
Yeah, I think when we talk about the transition, I think that probably reasonable credit is given to people like Joe Slobo, Mike Maharaj. Of course, Oliver Tambo was the key figure in exile, but he had a stroke in 1989 and he was really out of it when it came to the transition. Chris Hani would have played a role in the transition, but he also was assassinated before the completion of the transition process. Thabo Mbeki played an important role. But there were also inside people. Cyril Ramaphosa played an important role. So it was a combination. It wasn't just exiles. It was a combination of people who'd always been on the inside and exiles got together. And I think what was remarkable was that they were able to combine, to negotiate, and to achieve a lot through negotiation. Through having a good idea of what they wanted, and actually getting most of what they wanted, I think.
Now we're speaking about all of this history, but what do you hope people who pick up this book today really take away from it? I hope that they take away something about the culture of exile. I try to argue that there wasn't a single culture of exile. The culture of exile was different from place to place. So Angola is one place, Zambia is another place, Tanzania is another place. I would argue that Zambia was very important because the headquarters of the ANC was in Zambia for most of the time. But also the ANC in Zambia and its leadership sort of reflected the culture of Zambia to an extent, which is a relatively peaceful place, a relatively benign environment. it was a front. It wasn't a civil war going on, and I think that that's the culture of exile. I think was most important, and there was a close cooperation between Kenneth Kaunda, who was then president of Zambia, Oliver Tambo. They had very similar attitudes, and they were both concerned, Zambia in relation to his own country, to maintain balance, to keep the country together. Tambo, I think, learned from him, but anyway would have had the idea that it was very important to keep the ANC as what you call a broad church, a broad front. There should be room for the ANC for people of different political views, people of different race groups. They must be held together. And that was his great achievement, I think. And I suppose what I hope people would take away from the book is respect for people like Tambo and others who managed to more or less keep the ANC together in very difficult circumstances.